Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world before it was fully mapped. Not the world as we know it now, measured by satellites, photographed from orbit, divided into borders, roads, time zones, and coordinates, but an older world, a wider world, a world whose edges were still soft, a world where distant mountains could be the homes of gods, where rivers could lead into darkness, where winds had names and tempers, and where the farthest places on the map were not empty, but alive with rumor. In that ancient world, the familiar lands were warm, bright, and human. There were harbors filled with ships, temples standing white beneath the sun, olive trees growing on dry hills, and roads leading from one city to another through dust, stone, and memory. There were kings, merchants, farmers, priests, poets, soldiers, and travelers. There were festivals, wars, harvests, sacrifices, marriages, funerals, and songs. The world that people knew was already full of beauty and danger, full of gods who could bless or destroy, and full of human beings trying, as human beings always have, to understand their place beneath the sky, but beyond the familiar lands, beyond the cities and their walls, beyond the islands of the Aegean, beyond the coasts where sailors could still name the harbors. The world began to change. The farther one traveled, the less certain everything became. Roads ended, languages shifted, forests stretched farther than stories could comfortably follow. Mountains rose in unfamiliar shapes. Rivers came from places no one had seen. The names of distant peoples grew strange, and the reports of travelers became mixed with imagination, fear, exaggeration, and wonder. To the south, there were burning deserts. To the east, there were ancient kingdoms and sacred mountains. To the west, there were seas of sunset, islands of the blessed, and the unknown waters where the sun seemed to disappear each evening. And to the north, there was cold. The north was not simply a direction, it was a force. It was the place from which winter came, the place of dark forests, hard rivers, snow-covered mountains, and winds that could cut through the body like a blade. To the ancient Greeks, that wind had a name, Boreas. Boreas was the north wind, fierce and powerful, the breath of winter, the invisible god who swept down from unknown regions and brought cold into the world of men. When Boreas moved, the sea became dangerous. Clouds gathered, trees bent, cloaks were pulled tighter, fire became precious, and yet the Greeks told of a land beyond Boreas, not merely far to the north, not simply colder than all known places, not a wasteland at the end of the earth, but something far more mysterious, a hidden country beyond the reach of winter's cruelty, a blessed land past the north wind itself, a place where the cold boundary of the world gave way to a strange and sacred peace. Its name was Hyperborea. The word means beyond Boreas, beyond the north wind. But like all great mythical names, it carries more than one meaning. Hyperborea was not just a location. It was an idea, a direction of the soul, a dream placed at the edge of geography. It was imagined as a paradise beyond hardship, a place where the air was pure, where the people lived long and happy lives, where war and sickness had little power, and where the gods, especially Apollo, were honored with music, offerings, and joy. This is the first great mystery of Hyperborea. It was a northern paradise. It belonged to the world of snow, distance, and ice, and yet it was described not as a place of misery, but as a land of light. It stood beyond the cold, but was not conquered by cold. It lay beyond the north wind, but was not ruled by winter. It was remote, but not abandoned. It was hidden, but not dark. It was the frozen paradise of the ancient gods. In many stories, The Hyperboreans were a blessed people, almost untouched by ordinary human suffering. They did not live under the same heavy shadow as other mortals. Their land was filled with sacred order. Their lives were shaped by celebration, song, ritual, and peace. They were especially beloved by Apollo, the god of music, prophecy, healing, purification, and radiant harmony. Some traditions imagined that Apollo himself traveled to Hyperborea, leaving the familiar sanctuaries of Greece and journeying beyond the north wind in a chariot drawn by swans. Pause for a moment and imagine that image. The god of light rising into the cold northern sky, white swans carrying him through the clear air. Beneath him, the known world falls away. The temples, the cities, the seas, the warm hills, the smoke of sacrifices, the voices of worshippers. The farther he travels, the quieter the world becomes. Snow appears on distant mountains. Rivers shine like silver. Forests darken beneath the stars. Boreas blows across the earth below. But Apollo passes beyond him. And then, past the wind, past the harshness, past the ordinary limits of mortal life, there is Hyperborea. There, the people wait not in fear, but in joy. They are not frightened by the arrival of a god, because their lives are already tuned to him. Their songs are ready. Their offerings are prepared. Their temples are open to the sky. The air is cold and clear, but filled with a strange warmth of spirit. Apollo arrives among them as a returning presence, a light that belongs to them as much as to Delphi or Delos. In their land, divine music does not interrupt daily life. It completes it. This connection with Apollo is what gives Hyperborea its golden atmosphere. It is not simply a fantasy of escape. It is a vision of harmony. Apollo's music is measured. His light is clear. His healing requires purification. His prophecy reveals hidden order. A land beloved by Apollo is not chaotic, wild, or lawless. It is a land where life has found its proper rhythm. The Hyperboreans are blessed because they live in tune with something greater than themselves, and perhaps that is why the myth has lasted so long. Hyperborea is not only a story about the North. It is a story about the human longing for a place beyond disorder, a place beyond sickness, beyond war, beyond noise, beyond corruption, beyond the restless hunger that drives so much of history. The ancient world was not gentle. It knew plague, famine, battle, exile, betrayal, and the constant nearness of death. Against that reality, Hyperborea appeared like a distant light. It offered the thought that somewhere, somehow, human life could be different, not perfect in a childish way, not a place without structure or responsibility. Hyperborea was not imagined as chaos dressed in beauty. It was a paradise of order, ritual, and sacred proportion. Its people were happy because they lived rightly. They honored the gods. They sang the proper songs. They kept the festivals. They remained close to the rhythms of light, season, and divine presence. Their joy was not noisy. It was clear. This makes Hyperborea very different from many modern ideas of paradise. Today, paradise is often imagined as comfort without duty, pleasure without limit, escape without responsibility. But ancient paradises often worked differently. They were places where everything was in its right place. The human, the divine, the natural, and the cosmic were not separated. The people did not become free by abandoning order. They became free because they lived within the right order. Hyperborea, then, is a dream of peace through harmony. It is also a dream of distance. It lies far away, and that distance matters. Paradise must be difficult to reach, or else it becomes ordinary. A sacred land cannot be too easily entered by anyone carrying the confusion of the everyday world. So Hyperborea is protected by Boreas, by cold, by mountains, by unknown peoples, by the silence of the north, and perhaps by the fact that it was never meant to be found by ordinary travel at all. The ancients often placed sacred places at the margins of the world. The edge of the map was dangerous, but it was also holy. Beyond the known sea, there might be islands of the blessed. Beyond the mountains, a hidden kingdom. Beyond the desert, a garden. Beyond the mist, an immortal land. And beyond the north wind, Hyperborea. These places are not only geography, they are thresholds. They mark the point where ordinary life ends and another kind of reality begins. To cross into them is not only to travel across land, but to pass into a different condition of being. This is why Hyperborea cannot be understood only by asking where it was. That question is interesting, and later we will follow it into ancient geography, northern mountains, polar skies, and the attempts of writers to locate the hidden land. But before we ask where Hyperborea was, we must ask what Hyperborea meant. It meant the possibility of a world untouched by the worst of human life. It meant a people who had not fallen out of harmony with the divine. It meant that beyond winter, there could be light. It meant that the north, which seemed so harsh and remote, might conceal not emptiness, but blessing. It meant that the edge of the world was not only an ending, it might be a doorway. Imagine now the land itself, not as a place on a modern map, but as a dream slowly forming in the mind. A vast northern plain beneath a pale sky. Snow lies across the ground, not as a sign of death, but as a covering of purity. In the distance, mountains rise blue and silver, their peaks catching the last light of the sun. The air is cold enough to sharpen every breath, but it is not cruel. It is clean. It feels untouched. Above the mountains, the aurora begins to move, green and violet curtains of light drifting silently across the stars. Far below that sky, a city or sanctuary stands in the stillness. Not a crowded city of noise and smoke, but a place of pale stone, gold, and sacred fire. There are columns carved with swans, lyres, sunbursts, and laurel leaves. There are open courtyards where snow does not seem to gather, as if the land itself protects the holy ground. There are temples facing the horizon, built not to dominate nature, but to receive light. Rivers flow clear and cold nearby. White birds move across dark water. Somewhere, music rises. The music is gentle. It does not break the silence. It belongs to it. A lyre, perhaps. A chorus of voices. A hymn for Apollo, sung by people who have never known the fever of conquest. The sound moves through the cold air like golden thread. It reaches the mountains. It touches the frozen rivers. It rises into the sky where the stars burn with impossible clarity. This is not the music of entertainment. It is the music of a world in balance. In that world live the Hyperboreans, the golden people of the north. They are not golden because they are rich. Their gold is symbolic. They belong to the golden age, or to something like it, a state of human life before corruption became ordinary. They live long lives according to the stories. They are healthy, peaceful, joyful, and devoted to the gods. They do not seem driven by greed or ambition. They do not build empires. They do not cross the world with armies. Their greatness is inward and sacred. What would it be like to live among such a people? To wake beneath a sky of clear northern light, to hear no sounds of battle, to walk through a land where every festival has meaning, where old age is honored, where death is not terror, where music belongs to daily life, and where the gods are not distant abstractions, but near presences. woven into the rhythm of the year. Hyperborea asks us to imagine not simply a different place, but a different human condition. That is why the myth still feels powerful. We may know that the world is mapped now. We may know that no expedition has found a literal kingdom of Apollo beyond the north wind. We may understand the Arctic through climate science, indigenous history, ecology, geology, and exploration. And still, the idea of Hyperborea remains. It remains because it speaks to something maps cannot satisfy. Maps can tell us where the north is. They cannot tell us why the north has so often felt sacred. The far north still carries an atmosphere unlike almost any other region of the imagination. It is vast. It is quiet. It is bright and dark in extremes. It has long days, long nights, snowfields, frozen seas, auroras, and horizons that make human life feel small. It can be brutal, but also astonishingly beautiful. It feels close to the beginning of the world, or to the end of it. No wonder ancient people, hearing fragments of such places, turned them into myth. Hyperborea may have grown from many seeds: travelers' tales, northern trade routes, amber from distant coasts, rumors of strange skies, stories of peoples beyond the known world, and the religious imagination of Apollo's worshippers. But the myth that grew from those seeds became larger than any single origin. It became a symbol of the sacred north. And every sacred north is also an inner north. It is the place in us that longs for stillness, clarity, and distance from the noise of the world. It is the part of the mind that looks beyond the storm and wonders whether peace exists somewhere past it. It is the hope that coldness is not the final truth, that beyond the harsh wind there may be warmth of another kind, not the warmth of summer fields, but the warmth of meaning, music, and divine order. Tonight, as we begin this journey, we will follow Hyperborea through the layers of its legend. We will listen to the Greek stories of the people beyond Boreas. We will follow Apollo and his swans into the hidden land. We will imagine a paradise of snow, sun, and eternal spring. We will ask who the Hyperboreans were thought to be: mortals, blessed humans, sacred ancestors, or something closer to gods. We will walk through temples beneath the polar lights, explore the sacred geography of the far north, and look upward to the polar sky, where stars seem to circle the axis of the world. We will also look at the echoes, shadows, and later transformations of the myth. We will ask why Hyperborea faded from ancient geography, why it continued to survive in imagination, and why, after all this time, the name still calls to us from the ice. There is no need to hurry. Hyperborea is not a land reached by speed. It is a land approached through silence. It asks us to move slowly, as one would cross snow at night, listening to the sound of one's own breath and the distant movement of wind. It asks us to let the modern world grow quiet for a while, to leave behind the crowded center of history and travel toward the edge where myth begins. So imagine the known world fading behind us. The harbors grow small. The temples of Greece become pale shapes under the southern sun. The roads end. The languages become unfamiliar. The forests deepen. The rivers grow cold. The mountains rise. The wind begins to blow, strong and sharp, from the north. This is Boreas, the threshold wind, the breath of winter. For a long time, he seems like the end of the journey. But the myth says he is not the end. Beyond him, somewhere past the cold and the darkness, there is another land, a land of swans and sacred music, a land of snow that shines like silver, a land where Apollo is welcomed with songs, a land where the people live in peace at the edge of the world. Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, the frozen paradise of the ancient gods. The Greek legend of Hyperborea begins with a name that already sounds like a doorway. Hyperborea, the land beyond Boreas, beyond the north wind. To the ancient Greeks, this was not simply a poetic way of saying very far north. Boreas was a divine force, a wind with personality, power, and mythic presence. He was winter's breath, the cold that swept down from unknown regions, the unseen god who could roughen the sea, chill the air, and remind mortals that the world was governed by powers larger than human will. To say that a land lay beyond Boreas was to say that it existed beyond one of nature's great thresholds. That is what makes Hyperborea so strange from the beginning. If Boreas brought the cold, then a land beyond him should seem even harsher, even darker, even more impossible for human life. But the Greeks imagined the opposite. Hyperborea was not a frozen wasteland. It was a blessed country, a place of peace and beauty, where the people lived in harmony with the gods. It was northern and yet radiant. It was distant and yet sacred. It stood at the edge of the world, but instead of representing fear, it represented a kind of divine calm. The Hyperboreans were often described as a fortunate and holy people. They were said to live long lives, free from ordinary misery. War did not define them. Sickness did not haunt them in the same way it haunted other mortals. Their land was filled with music, ritual, and celebration. They honored Apollo, the god of light, prophecy, healing, and harmony, and Apollo, in turn, seemed to favor them. They were not imagined as powerful because they conquered others, but because they lived in right relationship with the divine. This is important because in many ancient stories, distant peoples are portrayed as strange, dangerous, monstrous, or uncivilized. The edges of the map were often places where the imagination placed giants, serpents, impossible animals, and terrifying tribes. But Hyperborea was different. The people beyond the north wind were not less than ordinary humanity. In some ways, they were more. Their remoteness did not make them barbaric. It made them pure. They were far from the crowded, restless, violent center of the world. And because of that distance, they seemed closer to the gods. The Greek world itself was full of conflict. City fought city. Families were torn apart by ambition and revenge. Plague could strike without warning. A bad harvest could bring hunger. A storm could destroy ships and the lives attached to them. The gods were worshipped, but they were also feared. Human life was fragile, and everyone knew it. Against that background, the legend of a people who lived without the ordinary weight of suffering must have felt deeply powerful. Hyperborea offered a vision of life, as it might be if harmony rather than struggle governed the world. Some ancient writers associated Hyperborea with the far north beyond the lands of the Scythians, or beyond mysterious mountains, sometimes called the Rhipaean Mountains. These mountains were imagined somewhere in the northern reaches of the world, a barrier beyond which the ordinary geography of men gave way to something stranger. Whether the Greeks thought of them as real, symbolic, or both, they served the same mythic purpose as many sacred boundaries. They guarded the hidden land. To reach Hyperborea, one had to pass beyond known peoples, beyond familiar climates, beyond the cold wind itself, and perhaps beyond the ordinary condition of mortality. This threshold quality is essential. Hyperborea was not supposed to be easy to reach. A paradise that can be entered casually loses its mystery. Hidden lands in mythology are almost always protected by difficulty. Oceans, mountains, deserts, mist, storms, divine guardians, or the simple impossibility of knowing the road. Hyperborea was protected by Northness itself. It was beyond the place where winter was born. It was beyond the wind that made travel dangerous and life harsh. It existed behind cold as a secret behind a veil. The ancient accounts do not give us one neat description. Hyperborea appears in fragments, and these fragments sometimes differ. One writer emphasizes its people, another its connection with Apollo, another the sacred offerings sent from the land, another its impossible distance. This is part of the beauty of the myth. Hyperborea is never fully closed. It is not described like an ordinary city with walls, streets, laws, and rulers. It remains open, glowing at the edge of the story, defined as much by atmosphere as by detail. One of the most fascinating elements of the legend is the connection between Hyperborea and Greek sanctuaries, especially Delos and Delphi. Delos was sacred as the birthplace of Apollo and Artemis, while Delphi was Apollo's great oracular sanctuary, the place where divine wisdom was sought by kings, cities, and ordinary people. Stories were told of offerings traveling from Hyperborea to these sacred places, passed from one people to another across long distances. Whether these stories preserve echoes of real ritual exchange, trade routes, or pure sacred imagination, their meaning is clear. The far northern paradise was spiritually connected to the heart of Greek religion. The idea is beautiful. Somewhere beyond the north wind, a blessed people prepared offerings for Apollo. These gifts then traveled through the world, crossing lands, peoples, and languages, until they reached the god's sanctuaries in the south. The edge of the world sent purity to the center. The distant north was not cut off from the sacred life of Greece. It nourished it. Hyperborea was far away, but its devotion moved through hidden paths. Some traditions speak of Hyperborean maidens who came to Delos with offerings and became part of the island's sacred memory. Their stories are fragmentary, but the image remains haunting. Young women from beyond Boreas, traveling to Apollo's island, carrying gifts from a land almost beyond the world. Their journey joins opposites, snow and sunlight, north and south, mystery and worship, distance and intimacy. They seem almost like messengers from a purer age, bringing the breath of Hyperborea into the warm light of the Aegean. Azapkun. The Hyperboreans, then, were not imagined simply as isolated dream people living in unreachable bliss. They participated in sacred exchange. They gave offerings. They honored Apollo. They were part of a larger divine order. Their remoteness was not emptiness. It was a kind of purity preserved at a distance, and sometimes sent into the known world as a blessing. This relationship with Apollo shaped how the Greeks imagined their character. A people beloved by Apollo would not be chaotic, violent, or lawless. Apollo was the god of the lyre, of measured song, of prophecy, of purification, of healing, of clear form and radiant order. The Hyperboreans were therefore imagined as a people of song, ritual, and balance. Their happiness was not wild pleasure. It was harmony. Their freedom was not disorder. It was life lived in tune with the sacred. This gives Hyperborea a different mood from many other mythical places. It is not a realm of monsters to be defeated. It is not a kingdom of treasure to be plundered. It is not a city of pride waiting for destruction. It is a place of relief, a place where life has become gentle without becoming meaningless, a place where the human being is no longer at war with the world. Perhaps that is why death itself appears differently in some Hyperborean traditions. The Hyperboreans were sometimes said to live extraordinarily long lives, and in certain accounts, when they had reached the fullness of life, they chose death peacefully, as though departing from a festival rather than being dragged into darkness. Whether this was meant literally or poetically, it suggests a profound difference between ordinary mortals and the blessed people beyond Boreas. For them, death was not the same terror. It was part of order. A life lived in harmony could end in harmony. This is one of the gentlest ideas in the myth. The Hyperboreans are not immortal gods, but they are not crushed by mortality in the ordinary way. They live so fully aligned with divine rhythm that even the end of life loses some of its violence. Their world is not free from all endings, but endings there are softened, ritualized, and made meaningful. The Greek legend of Hyperborea therefore gives us a picture of paradise that is more subtle than simple pleasure. It is a land where the gods are near, where music shapes life, where people honor what is sacred, where distance protects purity, and where suffering does not rule as it does elsewhere. It is a place beyond the world's harsh wind, but not outside the world's spiritual order. It is remote, but connected, hidden, but generous, northern, but radiant. And perhaps this is why the myth survived. Hyperborea answered a longing that did not belong only to the Greeks. It answered the wish that somewhere, beyond the storms of ordinary existence, there might be a way of life untouched by the worst parts of being human. It answered the hope that not all peoples were condemned to violence, sickness, and fear. It answered the dream that the gods might favor a land so completely that human life there became almost musical. Imagine a Greek listener hearing of Hyperborea for the first time. Perhaps he stands in Delphi, beneath the sacred slopes, after hearing the oracle speak in riddles. Perhaps he is on Delos, watching offerings laid before Apollo. Perhaps he sits in a harbor at night, listening to sailors talk of distant lands. The story reaches him like cold light. Beyond the north wind, there is a country where people live in peace, where Apollo is honored more purely than anywhere, where swans cross the sky, where life is long and suffering is light. He may not know whether to believe it, but belief is not the only way myths enter us. The image remains. For a while, the world feels larger. The north is no longer only cold. It is a secret. The wind is no longer only hardship. It is a threshold. The unknown is no longer only danger. It may also be blessing. That is the Greek legend of Hyperborea, a sacred people at the far edge of the world, living beyond Boreas in the light of Apollo. A myth not of conquest or terror, but of distance, purity, music, and peace. A dream of humanity as it might be when life is no longer broken from the divine. And as we continue deeper into this story, we follow Apollo himself toward that hidden land where the golden people of the north wait beneath a sky of snow, stars, and sacred silence. Chapter 3: Apollo and the Golden People of the North. If Hyperborea is the land beyond the north wind, then Apollo is the light that makes the land holy. Without Apollo, Hyperborea might be only a strange northern paradise, a beautiful rumor placed somewhere beyond the edge of the map. But with Apollo, it becomes something more, a sacred homeland of music, healing, purity, prophecy, and divine order. The Hyperboreans are not merely fortunate people living far away from the troubles of the world. They are a people beloved by the god of radiant harmony. Apollo is one of the most luminous and complex gods of the Greek imagination. He is associated with light, but not only with sunlight. His light is clarity, form, proportion, truth, and revelation. He is the god of the lyre, the instrument of measured beauty. He is the god of prophecy, speaking through oracles in words that are powerful, mysterious, and often difficult to understand. He is the god of healing, but also a god who can send plague when order is broken. He purifies, he reveals, he wounds and restores. His presence is beautiful, but never careless. This makes his bond with Hyperborea deeply meaningful. Hyperborea is not a paradise of laziness or indulgence. It is not imagined as a place where people simply enjoy endless pleasure without responsibility. It is a paradise of alignment. The people are happy because they live in tune with sacred order. Apollo, more than any other god, represents that order as music, light, and measure. A land beloved by Apollo must be a land where life itself has become like a well-tuned lyre. In some traditions, Apollo travels to Hyperborea. He leaves behind the familiar sanctuaries of Greece, the bright island of Delos, the slopes of Delphi, the temples, festivals, and human prayers of the known world. Then he journeys north, beyond ordinary lands, beyond the home of Boreas, beyond the cold wind that marks the threshold of the impossible. Sometimes the image is made even more beautiful. Apollo rides in a chariot drawn by swans. The swan is the perfect bird for this myth. It belongs to water and sky, to silence and song, to whiteness and grace. Swans glide over lakes as though barely touching the world, and when they take flight, they seem to carry something ceremonial in their movement. A god arriving in a swan-drawn chariot does not arrive like a conqueror. He does not break the sky with thunder. He comes in brightness, music, and grace. Imagine the journey. Apollo rises from the known world and travels northward. Beneath him, the Mediterranean grows distant. The blue sea becomes a memory. The fields and cities of Greece shrink into the haze behind him. Ahead, the land grows wilder. Forests deepen. Rivers shine in the cold. Mountains appear with snow on their shoulders. The air becomes sharper, clearer, quieter. Boreas moves across the world below, but Apollo passes beyond his reach. Then, after the long silence of the north, Hyperborea opens. It is not a dark or miserable place. It glows. Snow shines like silver beneath the sky. Rivers run clear through valleys of pale grass and evergreen trees. Mountains rise around the land like a sacred enclosure. Perhaps the aurora moves overhead in curtains of green and violet light. Perhaps the sun hangs low for long hours, turning the horizon gold. At the center of this world, the people gather to welcome the god. They do not welcome him with fear. This matters. Many myths show humans trembling before divine power, and for good reason. Gods are dangerous. Their presence can overwhelm mortal life. But the Hyperboreans seem to stand in a gentler relationship with Apollo. They are already his people in spirit. Their songs are ready. Their offerings are prepared. Their lives are shaped by his rhythm. When Apollo arrives, he is not a stranger descending into chaos. He is a returning light entering a land already tuned to him. The golden people of the north are golden not because they possess vast treasure, but because they belong to a golden condition of life. Gold in myth is the metal of light, incorruptibility, and sacred value. It does not rust like iron. It does not darken like lesser metals. It shines with a warmth that seems almost solar. To call the Hyperboreans golden is to say that they are close to the brightness of the first age, close to a condition of humanity before disorder, greed, and violence became ordinary. Their gold is spiritual. They are rich in harmony. They are wealthy in peace. They possess the rarest treasure, a life not broken from the divine. Apollo's music is central to this vision. The lyre is not just entertainment. It is a symbol of order. A lyre must be tuned. If the strings are too loose, they cannot sing. If they are too tight, they snap. Harmony depends on proportion. The same is true of a human soul, a community, or a civilization. Too much force, and life breaks. Too little form, and life loses meaning. Apollo's music teaches balance. The Hyperboreans, living under Apollo's favor, are imagined as people whose entire society has been tuned. Their festivals, their offerings, their daily rhythms, perhaps even their seasons, all move according to sacred measure. They sing not because they are escaping life, but because song is the natural expression of a world in balance. Their music is not noise, it is structure made beautiful. Picture a Hyperborean festival. The air is cold and clear, but not cruel. Snow gleams on the mountains, while the sacred valley remains bright and calm. People gather in white, gold, and pale blue garments, colors of snow, sunlight, and sky. Swans move over a dark lake nearby. A temple stands open to the horizon, its columns carved with laurel leaves, sunbursts, and the shapes of birds. In the center, offerings are placed for Apollo, perhaps garlands, fruit, amber, white stones, bowls of clear water, and instruments ready to be played. Then the music begins. At first, one lyre, a single line of sound in the cold air. Then voices join, slowly, without urgency. The song rises, not loudly, but purely. It is not a performance for applause. It is a form of alignment. The people sing to Apollo, but they also sing themselves into harmony with the land, the sky, the seasons, and one another. The sound moves across snow and stone, into the mountains, upward toward the aurora, and for a moment, the whole northern world seems to listen. This is Hyperborea at its most beautiful, civilization as ceremony. Apollo is also a god of prophecy, and this gives the Hyperboreans a connection to hidden knowledge. Prophecy in the ancient world was not simply prediction, it was contact with deeper order. The oracle did not merely tell the future, as if reading from a list of events. It revealed patterns, warnings, possibilities, and divine meanings. To be close to Apollo was to live near the boundary between the visible and the invisible. In Hyperborea, prophecy would not feel like a frightening interruption. It would be part of the rhythm of life. The people might read the sky, the flight of birds, the silence before snow, the movement of light, the timing of dreams. They would not seek to dominate the future. They would seek to understand how to remain aligned with it. This is different from control. It is listening. Apollo's healing aspect also shapes the myth. The Hyperboreans are said to live free from many ordinary forms of suffering. This does not mean they are simply lucky. In the symbolic logic of the myth, health comes from harmony. A society aligned with Apollo, with music, purity, and sacred measure, would be a society where illness has less power. Healing is not only the treatment of the body, it is the restoration of order. This idea may feel ancient, but it still speaks to us. Modern people often experience illness, exhaustion, and anxiety not only as physical conditions, but as signs of imbalance. Too much noise, too much speed, too much separation, too little rest, too little meaning. Hyperborea imagines a world where life itself is arranged to heal rather than wound. Clean air, ritual, music, community, sacred time, and closeness to divine order all become forms of medicine. The Hyperboreans' long lives are part of this same pattern. They do not live long because they have conquered death through machinery or ambition. They live long because their lives are not consumed by disorder. Their world does not burn them out. They are not driven by endless competition. They are not eaten by greed. They do not seem to waste life in conflict. Their longevity is the fruit of peace, and when death comes, in some versions, it comes gently. The Hyperboreans having lived long and joyful lives, are said to depart willingly when their time is complete. This is one of the most remarkable ideas in the legend. Death is not abolished, but it is transformed. It is no longer terror, punishment, or collapse. It becomes a final act within a life that has remained whole. A culture that can imagine death this way imagines life differently too. If death is not an enemy to be feared every moment, then life does not need to be frantic. People do not need to seize, hoard, conquer, or prove themselves constantly. They can live slowly. They can sing. They can honor the god. They can allow each season to arrive and pass. Hyperborea is peaceful, partly because its people are not ruled by the panic of mortality. Apollo's presence makes this possible, because he brings form to the unknown. His light reveals. His music orders. His healing purifies. His prophecy places human life inside a larger pattern. The Hyperboreans can accept life because they feel it as meaningful. They can accept death because death, too, belongs to the music. This does not make them gods. They remain human, or at least human-like. But they are humans, living as close to divinity as mortals can. They show what humanity might become if it were not torn apart by its own disorder. In them, the Greeks imagined a people who had achieved what ordinary cities could not: peace without weakness, ritual without fear, joy without excess, and nearness to the gods without destruction. The offerings sent from Hyperborea to Apollo's sanctuaries are another sign of this sacred relationship. The Hyperboreans do not keep their blessing entirely to themselves. They send gifts across the world through long chains of peoples toward Delos and Delphi. These gifts may have been imagined as physical objects, but they also carry symbolic meaning. The purity of the far north travels into the known world. The sacred edge nourishes the sacred center. Imagine those offerings moving slowly southward, wrapped carefully, passed from one community to another, carried across rivers, forests, mountains, and plains. Each hand may not know the full story. Each people may only know that these gifts must continue. At last, they arrive at Apollo's shrine, carrying with them the aura of the land beyond Boreas. In this way, Hyperborea becomes present in Greece, not as a place visited by many, but as a blessing received. This hidden exchange is one of the most beautiful parts of the myth. It suggests that the world is connected by sacred threads invisible to ordinary politics. The farthest land and the central temple are linked. The north sends light southward. The god who receives offerings in Greece is also honored beyond the wind. Divine order is larger than any one culture can contain. That may have been one reason the Greeks found Hyperborea so fascinating. It expanded Apollo's world. He was not only a Greek god in a narrow sense. His light reached beyond the borders of familiar geography. His music was welcomed by a perfect people at the edge of the earth. His sacred influence was cosmic, not provincial. Hyperborea made Apollo larger, and Apollo made Hyperborea brighter. Without him, the northern paradise might be only peaceful. With him, it becomes musical, prophetic, healing, golden. It becomes a land where the divine does not need to punish in order to be honored, where worship is joy rather than fear, and where a god's presence completes the pattern of daily life. There is something deeply restful in this image, a society not constantly trying to become something else, a people who do not need to prove themselves through conquest, a land where the highest human activity is not war, trade, or argument, but song, a world in which the God of light comes not to judge a broken city, but to visit a people already living in harmony. Perhaps this is why Hyperborea feels so different from Atlantis. Atlantis dazzles and falls. It is a myth of brilliance and danger. Hyperborea does not fall in the same dramatic way. It recedes. It remains distant. It is not destroyed by pride. It is hidden by purity. Atlantis warns us about power. Hyperborea comforts us with order, and in the quiet hours of listening, that comfort matters. The image of Apollo among the Hyperboreans is not meant to excite the mind into fear or tension. It invites the mind to slow down, to imagine cold air, clear music, white wings, golden light, and a people who have found a way to live without breaking the world around them. As the festival ends, Apollo prepares to depart. The swans gather on the shining lake. The people stand in silence, not with grief, but with trust, because sacred time is cyclical. A god who leaves may return. The song has been sung. The offerings have been made. The land is still bright. The people remain in harmony. Apollo rises into the northern sky. The swans lift him over the snowfields, over the mountains, over the silent forests, back toward the lands where mortals struggle, pray, ask questions, and wait for answers. Behind him, Hyperborea remains beyond the wind, calm, golden, and almost impossible to reach. The land of the blessed, the people of the lyre, the frozen paradise, where the god of light is welcomed with songs. If Hyperborea is the land beyond the north wind, then Apollo is the light that makes it holy. Without Apollo, Hyperborea might be only a beautiful rumor from the edge of the ancient map, a northern paradise imagined somewhere beyond snow, mountains, and strange skies. But with Apollo, it becomes something deeper. It becomes a sacred country, a land of music, healing, prophecy, purity, and divine order. The Hyperboreans are not merely fortunate people, living far from the troubles of the world. They are the people beloved by the god of radiant harmony. Apollo was one of the most luminous gods of the Greek imagination. He was associated with light, but not only with sunlight. His light was clarity. It was truth revealed after confusion. It was the clean line of a temple, the exact note of a lyre, the purification after sickness, the hidden meaning spoken through an oracle. Apollo was beautiful, but not soft in a careless way. He could heal, but he could also send plague. He could bring music, but his music required measure. He could reveal the future, but his prophecies were often difficult, demanding, and dangerous to misunderstand. This is why his connection with Hyperborea matters so much. Hyperborea was not imagined as a paradise of laziness or wild pleasure. It was not a place where people simply escaped responsibility and lived in endless comfort. It was a paradise of alignment. Its people were blessed because they lived in tune with sacred order. Apollo's lyre becomes the perfect symbol for this. A lyre must be tuned carefully. If the strings are too loose, they cannot sing. If they are too tight, they break. Harmony exists only when each part finds its right tension, its right place, its right relation to the whole. The Hyperboreans, in this mythic vision, were a people tuned like that. Their lives were not ruled by war, greed, noise, or fear. They were shaped by ritual, music, offering, celebration, and peace. They did not seem to need conquest in order to feel important. They did not build greatness by crushing others beneath them. Their greatness was quieter. It came from living correctly, from honoring the gods, from keeping the rhythm of the sacred world alive. Some stories imagined Apollo traveling to Hyperborea. The god leaves behind the temples and sanctuaries of the Greek world, Delphi with its oracle, Delos with its bright sacred shores, the cities where men and women pray, sacrifice, argue, trade, and suffer. And he journeys northward, beyond the known lands, beyond the rough breath of Boreas himself. In some versions, he travels in a chariot drawn by swans. The image is almost dreamlike. Apollo does not arrive like a storm god splitting the sky with thunder. He does not come as a conqueror. He comes with white wings, music, and light. The swan is the perfect creature for this journey. It belongs to water and sky. It moves with grace. It carries a sense of silence and song at the same time. A swan-drawn chariot suggests that Apollo's path to Hyperborea is not violent. It is ceremonial. Imagine the journey. The warm world of Greece falls away below him. The blue Mediterranean becomes distant. The islands disappear into haze. The fields and cities grow smaller, then vanish. Ahead, the land becomes colder and wilder. Forests spread across the earth like dark cloth. Rivers shine in the low light. Mountains lift their white peaks into the sky. Boreas moves below, the fierce north wind rushing over the world, bending trees and hardening rivers. But Apollo passes beyond him. Then, at last, the wind quiets. Beyond Boreas, the world opens into stillness. Snow lies over the land, but it shines with a strange brightness. Mountains form a silver wall around hidden valleys. The sky is clear beyond anything known in the south. Perhaps auroras move across the stars like green and violet curtains. Perhaps the sun lingers low on the horizon, turning everything gold. There, in that sacred northern light, the Hyperboreans wait. They do not wait in fear. That is important. Many encounters between gods and mortals are full of danger. A god's presence can overwhelm, punish, transform, or destroy. But the Hyperboreans seem to stand in a gentler relationship with Apollo. They are already his people in spirit. Their songs are ready. Their offerings are prepared. Their temples are open. When Apollo arrives, he is not a stranger descending into chaos. He is a returning light entering a land already prepared to receive him. This is the heart of the Hyperborean dream. Divine presence without terror. The god comes, and the people rejoice. They honor him not because they are forced to, but because their lives are naturally ordered around his brightness. In Hyperborea, worship is not panic. It is music. The golden people of the north are golden not because they possess endless treasure, but because they belong to a golden condition of life. Gold, in myth, is more than wealth. It is the color of sunlight, incorruptibility, and sacred value. It does not rust like iron. It does not darken easily. It carries the glow of something pure and lasting. To call the Hyperboreans golden is to say that they live close to the brightness of an earlier, better age. They are not rich in the ordinary sense. They are rich in harmony. Their gold is spiritual. They possess the rarest treasure, a life not broken away from the divine. At the center of that life is music. Apollo's music is not only entertainment, it is the sound of order made beautiful. In a world ruled by Apollo, music is not something added after the important work is done. It is part of the important work. It shapes the soul. It calms the body. It brings the community into one rhythm. It reminds people that beauty depends on measure, and that measure depends on listening. Picture a Hyperborean festival. The air is cold, but clean. Snow gleams on the mountains, while the sacred valley below seems touched by a gentler season. People gather in garments of white, pale blue, and gold. Swans drift across a dark lake nearby. A temple stands open to the horizon, its columns carved with laurel leaves, sunbursts, and birds. Offerings are placed for Apollo. Clear water, golden amber, branches of laurel, white stones, flowers, perhaps fruit brought from sheltered gardens. Then a lyre begins. At first, there is only one line of sound, pure, simple, and calm. Then voices join it, not loudly, not with the excitement of a crowd trying to overwhelm silence. The voices rise as if they belong to the air itself. They move across the valley, touch the mountains, pass over the snow, and rise into the sky. The people sing not to escape life, but to align themselves with it. Their song is an offering, a memory, and a form of peace. This is why Hyperborea feels so different from many other mythical places. It is not a land of monsters to defeat. It is not a kingdom of treasure to steal. It is not an empire doomed by pride. It is a land where the highest image of civilization is a people singing in harmony with a god. Apollo is also the god of prophecy, and this gives the Hyperboreans another kind of sacred depth. Prophecy, in the ancient world, was not simply the ability to predict events. It was the ability to touch hidden order. The oracle does not merely say what will happen. The oracle reveals that human life is part of patterns larger than human understanding. Apollo's prophetic light shows what is concealed beneath ordinary sight. In Hyperborea, prophecy would not feel like a frightening interruption. It would be woven into life. The people might read the sky, the seasons, the silence before snow, the flight of birds, the return of swans, the movement of stars around the northern heavens. They would not seek to dominate the future. They would seek to remain aligned with it. This is a gentler kind of knowledge. Not control, but listening. Apollo's healing nature also shapes the legend. The Hyperboreans were often imagined as free from ordinary sickness and misery. This does not mean they were simply lucky. In the symbolic logic of the myth, health comes from harmony, a people living in right relationship with the divine, with music, with ritual, with the land and the seasons, would naturally suffer less from disorder. Their medicine is not only herbs or sacred water. Their medicine is the order of life itself. That idea may be ancient, but it still feels strangely modern. Many people today experience suffering not only as physical illness, but as imbalance. Too much noise, too much pressure, too much speed, too little meaning, too little silence. Hyperborea offers the opposite image, a society arranged to heal rather than exhaust, a place where the body is not constantly forced against natural rhythm, a place where music, clean air, sacred time, and community are part of health. The Hyperboreans' long lives belong to this same vision. They do not live long because they have conquered death through power. They live long because their world does not consume them. They are not burned away by ambition. They are not sharpened into cruelty by war. They are not made sick by disorder. Their longevity is the fruit of peace, and when death comes, in some versions of the legend, it comes gently. The Hyperboreans, after living long and joyful lives, are said to depart willingly when their time is complete. This is one of the most beautiful and unusual ideas in the myth. Death is not abolished, but it is transformed. It is no longer terror, punishment, or collapse. It becomes the final note of a song properly sung. A culture that imagines death this way also imagines life differently. If death is not an enemy to be feared every moment, then life does not have to be frantic. People do not need to seize, hoard, dominate, and prove themselves constantly. They can live slowly. They can sing. They can honor the god. They can let each season arrive and pass. Hyperborea is peaceful partly because its people are not ruled by the panic of mortality. The offerings sent from Hyperborea to Apollo's sanctuaries deepen this sacred relationship. In some traditions, Gifts from the Hyperboreans traveled southward, passed from one people to another, until they reached places like Delos. Whether this reflects some memory of real ritual exchange or is purely symbolic, the image is powerful. The farthest north sends blessing into the known world. The hidden paradise is not selfish. Its purity travels. Imagine those offerings moving through ancient lands, wrapped carefully, carried across rivers, forests, and plains, passed from hand to hand by people who may not fully know their origin, but know they are sacred. At last, they arrive at Apollo's shrine, carrying with them the aura of the world beyond Boreas. In this way, Hyperborea becomes present in Greece without needing to be visited by ordinary travelers. It arrives as devotion. This hidden exchange suggests that the world is connected by sacred threads invisible to politics and power. The far edge and the holy center belong to the same divine order. The God who speaks at Delphi and shines over Delos is also welcomed in the distant north. His light is not trapped in one region. It moves through the world. Apollo makes Hyperborea holy, and Hyperborea makes Apollo's mystery larger. Perhaps that is one reason the myth survived. It offered a vision of a world where distance did not mean separation from the sacred. The people beyond the north wind were not forgotten by the gods. They were cherished. Their songs were heard. Their offerings mattered. Their hidden land was not outside divine order, but one of its purest expressions. There is something deeply restful in this image, a society not constantly trying to become something else, a people who do not need to prove themselves through conquest, a land where the highest human activity is not war, argument, or accumulation, but song, a world in which the God of light comes not to punish a broken city, but to visit a people already living in harmony. As the festival ends, Apollo prepares to depart. The swans gather on the shining lake. The people stand in silence, not with grief, but with trust. Sacred time is cyclical. A god who leaves may return. The song has been sung. The offerings have been made. The land remains bright. Apollo rises into the northern sky. The swans lift him over snowfields, over mountains, over the silent forests, back toward the lands where mortals struggle, pray, ask questions, and wait for answers. Behind him, Hyperborea remains beyond the wind, calm, golden, and almost impossible to reach. The land of the blessed, the people of the lyre, the frozen paradise where the god of light is welcomed with songs. Hyperborea is a land of paradox. It belongs to the far north, to the direction of cold, winter, darkness, and wind, and yet it is imagined as a paradise. It lies beyond Boreas, beyond the north wind, but not as a land crushed by endless ice. Instead, it appears in the ancient imagination as a place of strange gentleness, where snow and sunlight coexist, where cold becomes purity rather than suffering, and where the seasons seem to obey a more blessed law than they do in the ordinary world. This is what makes Hyperborea so different from a simple northern wilderness. A wilderness can be beautiful, but it is not necessarily kind. It can inspire awe and fear at the same time. Hyperborea, however, is not only remote and beautiful, it is sacredly protected. It is as if the harshness of the north wind has been left behind at the border, and beyond that border, the far north reveals its hidden heart, clear, luminous, peaceful, and almost untouched by decay. The phrase frozen paradise may sound like a contradiction, but in myth, contradictions often carry the deepest meaning. A paradise of snow is not a paradise of tropical abundance. It does not overwhelm the senses with heat, fruit, and flowers. It offers another kind of beauty: silence, clarity, stillness, pale light, and the feeling that the world has been purified. In Hyperborea, snow is not only coldness, it is brightness. It covers the land like a sacred cloth. It softens the rough edges of the earth. It reflects the sun until the whole landscape seems to glow. Imagine standing at the edge of Hyperborea at dawn. The sky is not yet fully blue. It is silver, violet, and pale gold. The air is cold enough that every breath feels clear, but not painful. Snow lies across the fields, yet in the distance there are valleys where green grass appears, where dark evergreen trees rise, and where rivers run bright between banks of stone. Mountains surround the land like walls of an enormous temple. Their peaks hold the first sunlight, while the lower world remains in blue shadow. Then the sun rises. It does not blaze violently. It comes slowly, spreading gold across snow, river, stone, and cloud. Every surface catches it. Ice becomes fire. The mountains turn rose-colored. The white wings of swans shine on dark water. The temples of the Hyperboreans, if we imagine them there, awaken in the light. Pale stone, golden roofs, open courtyards, columns carved with symbols of Apollo. The whole land seems less like ordinary geography and more like a sacred instrument touched by the first note of morning. In this paradise, cold is not an enemy. It is part of the land's purity. The people who live there are not bent and broken by winter. They are strengthened by clarity. Their faces are calm. Their movements are unhurried. Their homes are built not to hide from the world in fear, but to welcome light, shelter warmth, and remain open to the sky. Fire burns in sacred hearths. Clear water flows from mountain springs. The air smells of snow, cedar, stone, and smoke. The Hyperborean paradise is not lush in the same way as Lemuria or other lost worlds of the warm sea. Lemuria is green, oceanic, humid, wrapped in jungle and crystal temples beneath tropical skies. Hyperborea is different. Its beauty is spare. It is wide. It gives the mind room to breathe. There are no crowded markets, no heavy cities, no smoke-darkened streets. There is space between things, space between mountains, space between houses, space between words. Even the silence feels sacred. This silence is one of the most important qualities of Hyperborea. In ordinary life, silence can feel empty or lonely, but in Hyperborea, silence is full. It holds snow, stars, breath, distant water, the wingbeat of swans, the faint sound of a lyre from a temple courtyard. It is not the silence of abandonment. It is the silence of a world at peace with itself. At night, that silence deepens. The sky opens wider than it ever seems to open in the south. Stars burn sharply in the cold air. Perhaps the aurora moves above the mountains, green and blue and violet, like a divine curtain drawn slowly across heaven. The Hyperboreans might gather outside to watch it, not as a spectacle, but as a sacred sign. For them, the sky is not distant emptiness. It is part of the living order. The lights above are not separate from the songs below. One can imagine their temples built for this sky, not enclosed, heavy and dark, but open. Courtyards where snow does not disturb the ritual fire. Roofs designed to frame the stars. Pillars aligned with the rising of the sun after long darkness. Stone platforms from which priests or singers watch the turning heavens. In a land so close to the pole of imagination, the sky would be central to worship. The people would live beneath the great turning of the stars, and perhaps they would feel that the universe itself was a circle of music. The idea of eternal spring in Hyperborea is especially strange. How can a land of snow also be a land of spring? The answer lies in mythic climate, not ordinary weather. Hyperborea is beyond the north wind, and therefore beyond the cruelty of winter. It may contain snow and ice, but not suffering. It may be northern, but its northness has been transformed. It is winter purified of hardship, spring purified of decay, and sunlight purified of heat. The land holds opposites together. Perhaps there are valleys in Hyperborea where flowers bloom beside snowbanks. Perhaps warm springs rise from beneath the frozen ground, sending steam into the cold air. Perhaps sacred groves grow in sheltered places, their branches bright with leaves, even when mountains above them are white. Perhaps rivers never fully freeze, because Apollo's blessing runs through them like hidden fire. In myth, such things are possible, because the land itself belongs to divine favor. This is not weather as meteorology. It is weather as meaning. In the ordinary world, climate shapes human life through necessity. Cold demands shelter. Winter demands preparation. Hunger demands work. But in Hyperborea, nature seems reconciled with human happiness. The land is not hostile. It is majestic, clear, and generous. It gives beauty without cruelty. It gives snow without famine. It gives distance without loneliness. It gives light without burning. It is the North redeemed. The Hyperboreans' daily life would reflect this harmony. They would rise slowly in clear morning light. They would tend sacred fires, gather near temples, sing hymns, care for animals, walk beside rivers, prepare offerings, and hold festivals in honor of Apollo. Their homes might be built of pale stone and warm wood, with golden ornaments not for vanity, but for sacred brightness. Their clothing might be white, blue, and gold, echoing snow, sky, and sunlight. Their food would be simple and pure: grains, milk, honey, fruits from sheltered valleys, clear water, perhaps offerings shared after ceremony. Their festivals would not be wild chaos. They would be luminous gatherings of song, dance, and ritual. Imagine a long table, beneath an open sky, garlands of laurel and pale flowers, bowls of amber-colored honey, white birds moving near a sacred lake, children laughing softly, elders seated with dignity, musicians tuning lyres. In the distance, mountains stand in silence. Above, the sky slowly changes color. The festival is joyful, but not loud. It belongs to a people who do not need to drown out silence in order to feel alive. This kind of paradise offers a different emotional comfort from a paradise of abundance. In a lush garden paradise, the comfort comes from plenty: fruit, warmth, flowing water, flowers, shade. In Hyperborea, the comfort comes from purity and order. Everything unnecessary has fallen away. The land is stripped down to essentials: light, air, snow, music, fire, stars, water, stone, and sacred presence. It is a paradise for a tired mind, a mind overwhelmed by noise, complexity, and heat. Hyperborea cools the imagination. That may be why it works so well as a sleep story. It does not rush. It does not crowd the mind with too much movement. It invites the listener into wide spaces: the sound of wind over snow, the glow of a temple fire, the slow movement of swans across dark water, the aurora drifting over mountains, the quiet rhythm of a people who live without hurry. But Hyperborea is not only peaceful because of its landscape, it is peaceful because of its moral atmosphere. The people do not appear driven by envy, conquest, or restless hunger. Their paradise is not merely environmental, it is social and spiritual. War is absent because ambition has been calmed. Sickness is light because life is balanced. Death is gentle because existence has meaning. The land is beautiful because the people are in harmony, and the people are in harmony because the land and the gods hold them in order. This is the deeper dream of Hyperborea, that paradise is not just a place, but a relationship between people and gods, people and nature, people and time, people and death. The snow and sunlight are only the outer signs of an inner condition. Hyperborea is blessed because nothing is at war with its own nature. Imagine a Hyperborean evening. The sun has not fully disappeared, or perhaps it lingers in a long twilight that seems to last for hours. The mountains are violet. Snowfields glow faintly. Lamps are lit in the temple courtyards. A group of singers gathers near a sacred fire, their voices low and steady. Somewhere, children sleep under warm furs. Somewhere, elders speak quietly of old festivals and the times Apollo came among them. The air outside is cold, but within the circle of fire and song, there is no fear. Beyond the valley, Boreas may still blow over the rest of the world. Ships may struggle on dark seas. Cities may quarrel. Men may grow sick, old, frightened, and violent. But here, beyond the wind, another order remains. Not untouched, because it is ignorant of suffering, but untouched because it belongs to a different rhythm. This is why the paradise of Hyperborea feels almost impossible. It is not simply that the land is hard to find. It is that the condition it represents is hard to imagine sustaining. Human beings know conflict too well. We know how quickly peace becomes fragile, how easily desire turns into rivalry, how often beauty is used for power. A people who live in long harmony seem almost more mythical than the land itself. And yet, this is exactly why such myths matter. They give form to possibilities that ordinary history rarely shows us. Hyperborea tells us that a human world might be organized around music rather than war, clarity rather than confusion, sacred rhythm rather than restless ambition. It tells us that coldness may hide light, that silence may be full, that the farthest place from the center may be closest to peace. As the chapter closes, picture Hyperborea from above, a hidden northern land surrounded by mountains, shining under a sky of stars and auroras. Snowfields gleam like silver. Rivers cut black lines through white valleys. Temples glow with golden fire. Swans move across sacred lakes. Somewhere, Apollo's lyre is being played, and the sound is so pure that even the wind seems to pause and listen. This is the frozen paradise of the ancient gods, a land of snow, sun, and eternal spring, a place where winter becomes light, silence becomes music, and the edge of the world becomes a home for the blessed. Every hidden paradise asks the same question. Where was it? The moment a story gives us a land beyond the ordinary world, the mind begins to search for it. We want a direction, a mountain range, a river, an island, a coastline, some mark on the map that allows the dream to become almost real. Hyperborea, too, has always invited this question. If there was a land beyond the north wind, then where did the ancients imagine it to be? Beyond which mountains? Beyond which people? Beneath which sky? The simplest answer is also the most mysterious. Hyperborea was somewhere in the far north, but the far north, to the ancient Greeks, was not a fixed region in the modern sense. It was a wide zone of rumor and imagination. It began where reliable knowledge faded, where the familiar world gave way to forests, cold rivers, nomadic peoples, strange animals, and reports carried through many mouths before reaching the Mediterranean. The farther north a place was said to be, the more easily it became symbolic. The north was geography, but it was also atmosphere. In many accounts, Hyperborea was placed beyond the lands of the Scythians. To the Greeks, Scythia was already distant and strange, a great region of horse-riding peoples, open plains, cold winds, and customs different from those of the city-states. But Hyperborea lay even farther away. It was not simply Scythia, it was beyond Scythia, beyond the known tribes, beyond the boundaries of ordinary travel. The phrase "beyond the Scythians" works almost like "beyond the edge of the world." It tells us less about exact location and more about sacred distance. Other traditions placed Hyperborea beyond the Riparian Mountains, a mysterious northern mountain range mentioned by ancient writers. These mountains are difficult to identify with certainty. Some later readers tried to connect them with the Urals, the Carpathians, the Alps, or other ranges, but in mythic geography, their exact location matters less than their function. The Riparian Mountains were a barrier. They marked the passage from the known into the unknown, from ordinary north into sacred north. Beyond them, the harsh wind could no longer reach, and the blessed land began. Mountains often play this role in myth. They stand between worlds. They block the horizon and invite the imagination to ask what lies behind them. A hidden kingdom behind mountains feels more believable than one lying in an open field. The mountain protects the mystery. It says, "Not everyone may enter. One must cross height, cold, danger, and isolation before reaching the sacred valley beyond." Hyperborea, placed beyond mysterious mountains, becomes part of this ancient pattern. Paradise guarded by difficulty. Some writers imagined Hyperborea near the edge of Oceanus, the great world-encircling river or ocean that, in certain ancient cosmologies, surrounded the known Earth. This gives the land an even more otherworldly quality. It is not merely inland beyond northern tribes, it is near the cosmic boundary, near the waters that ring the world. Such geography is not meant to be read like a modern atlas. It belongs to a worldview where the physical edge of the earth and the spiritual edge of existence could meet. In later centuries, as geographical knowledge expanded, people tried to identify Hyperborea with many real northern places. Some looked toward the Arctic, some toward Scandinavia, some toward Siberia, some toward the lands beyond the Black Sea, or the Ural region, or even the islands of the northern Atlantic. Each attempt tells us something about the period making it. As maps changed, Hyperborea moved. It retreated farther north, farther east, farther into the ice, farther into the unknown spaces that remained. This is common with mythical lands. When the world is poorly mapped, they can live near the edge of ordinary knowledge. As exploration fills in the map, the hidden land must either vanish, move farther away, or become symbolic. Hyperborea did all three. It was sought in geography, then displaced by geography, then preserved in imagination. The more the physical north became known, the more Hyperborea became an inner or mythic north. Still, the real far north contains features that make the myth feel understandable. There are regions where the sun behaves strangely to those from lower latitudes, lingering for long summer days or disappearing into long winter darkness. There are auroras, which can transform the night sky into a moving curtain of light. There are vast snowfields, frozen seas, endless forests, and open tundra landscapes that make human settlements feel small. There are mountains and rivers that seem ancient beyond human time. Even without a literal Hyperborean kingdom, the North can feel like another order of reality. Imagine an ancient traveler hearing secondhand reports of such places, a land where summer light lasts unnaturally long, a land where the night sky burns with green fire, a land where snow covers the earth, and yet people survive, a land where amber, that golden substance like hardened sunlight, comes from distant shores, a land of swans, reindeer, wolves, forests, and rivers no Greek had seen. It would not take much for such reports to become sacred geography. Amber deserves a special place in this imagination. To people in the Mediterranean, amber was precious and mysterious. It came from the north through long trade networks, especially from Baltic regions, and carried with it the aura of distant lands. Golden, translucent, sometimes holding ancient insects inside it, amber seemed like sunlight captured in stone, a material from cold, northern shores that looked like frozen gold could easily feed the idea that the north was not only dark and harsh, but also strangely luminous. This blend of cold and light is central to the sacred geography of Hyperborea. The far north is frightening because it is cold, remote, and difficult, but it is also sacred because it is clear, bright, and removed from corruption. Its distance becomes purification. Its silence becomes holiness. Its snow becomes a symbol of untouched life. Its sky becomes a temple larger than any built by human hands. There may also have been real cultural contact behind the myth. Sacred offerings, said to travel from Hyperborea to Greek sanctuaries, may preserve, in mythic form, memories of exchange routes linking the Mediterranean with distant northern peoples. Objects, rituals, stories, and rumors moved across Europe long before modern maps connected them clearly. A gift traveling from hand to hand can become, over generations, a sacred object from the edge of the world. A trade route can become a path of divine offering, but even if there were real roots behind the legend, Hyperborea was never only a place from which goods came. It was a place from which blessing came. The Greeks did not imagine the Hyperboreans merely as suppliers of rare materials. They imagined them as a people favored by Apollo, living in peace and sending sacred gifts. Their land was not valuable because it was rich in resources. It was valuable because it was spiritually pure. This is a very different way to imagine geography. Modern maps often show land in terms of control, ownership, extraction, borders, and access. Ancient sacred geography saw some places as closer to the divine, some as dangerous, some as polluted, some as blessed, some as thresholds. Hyperborea was a blessed geography. It was a moral and spiritual landscape. To be there was to live differently. The sacred geography of Hyperborea also depends on its remoteness from ordinary history. The Greeks knew that cities corrupt, power corrupts, wealth brings rivalry, crowds bring noise, political life brings ambition. But Hyperborea, far from the great centers of conflict, could remain innocent in the imagination. Its distance protected it not only from travelers, but from history itself. It was too far away to be dragged into the ordinary cycles of empire, war, and decline. This is why many hidden paradises are far away. Distance preserves purity. If Hyperborea had been placed just outside Athens, it would not have worked. It had to be beyond the wind, beyond the known tribes, beyond the mysterious mountains. Its holiness required remoteness. The land had to be difficult to reach because it represented a state of life difficult to attain. Yet there is a sadness in this. The more sacred a place becomes, the less reachable it becomes. Hyperborea comforts the imagination, but it also withdraws from it. You can point northward, but you cannot easily arrive. You can hear of offerings, but you cannot walk the streets. You can imagine the temples, but no road clearly leads there. The sacred geography is built on longing. In this way, Hyperborea is both map and mirage. It appears whenever the north is distant enough to hold mystery. It moves when knowledge approaches. It remains visible only at the edge of certainty. This does not make it meaningless, it makes it mythic. A mythic place is not fake in the same way an error on a map is fake. It belongs to another kind of truth, the truth of what human beings place at the edges of their world. So, where was Hyperborea? It was beyond Boreas, beyond Scythia, beyond the Riparian Mountains, near the cosmic edge, in the Arctic imagination, in the shimmer of aurora and snow, in the amber roads leading south, in the stories of distant peoples and sacred offerings, in every northern horizon that seemed too bright and too silent to be merely empty. Perhaps no single location can hold it. Perhaps Hyperborea was never meant to be found as one country, because it was the sacred north itself, the dream that beyond hardship there is clarity, beyond cold there is light, and beyond the last known mountain there may be a land where human life has not fallen out of harmony with the gods. As we leave this chapter, imagine an ancient map spread under lamplight. The Mediterranean is filled with names: Greece, Egypt, Asia Minor, the islands, the seas, the familiar world. But as the map stretches northward, the names become fewer. Lines grow uncertain. Mountains appear like blue shadows. Rivers curve into blank space. At the top, where knowledge fades, a word is written like a whisper: Hyperborea, not simply a place, a direction toward the sacred. If Hyperborea lies in the far north, then it lies close not only to cold and snow, but to one of the most powerful images in the human imagination, the axis of the world. The farther north the mind travels, the more the sky begins to change. The heavens no longer seem to rise and fall in quite the same way. The stars appear to circle a fixed point. The night becomes a vast turning wheel. Above the northern horizon, one star or one region of the sky becomes a center around which everything else moves. For ancient people who watched the heavens carefully, this must have felt profound. The sky was not just decoration, it was calendar, compass, scripture, and mystery. The stars told sailors where they were. They told farmers when seasons were changing. They told priests when rituals should be performed. They gave pattern to time. In a world without electric light, the night sky was one of the great teachers of humanity. The northern sky has a special stillness at its center. Around the pole the stars turn. They do not simply disappear below the horizon like other stars. They circle. They return. They seem to guard a hidden point around which heaven itself revolves. It is easy to understand how the far north could become associated with cosmic order. If there is a place on earth nearest to the turning center of the sky, then perhaps that place is sacred. Perhaps it is closer to the divine mechanism of the world. This is where Hyperborea becomes more than a northern paradise. It becomes a land near the cosmic axis, a place not only beyond Boreas, but beneath the great pivot of the heavens. In such a land, people would live under the visible sign of order. Every night, the sky would remind them that the universe is not chaos. It turns around a center. Many cultures imagined such a center. Sometimes it was a world mountain, rising between earth and heaven. Sometimes it was a cosmic tree, with roots below and branches in the stars. Sometimes it was a sacred pillar, a pole, a temple, or a hidden land at the top of the world. The details change, but the idea remains. Somewhere, there is a center, a point where the worlds connect, a place through which heaven, earth, and the underworld are aligned. Hyperborea belongs naturally to this symbolism. Its far northern location places it close to the pole of the sky. Its peace reflects cosmic stability. Its connection with Apollo gives it music and measure. Its mountains and snow give it purity. It becomes, in the imagination, not merely a country, but a sacred alignment between earth and heaven. Imagine standing in Hyperborea at night. The land is quiet. Snow reflects faint starlight. The air is so clear that the stars seem close enough to speak. Around you are mountains, dark and still, forming a ring like the walls of an enormous temple. Above them, the sky turns slowly. The stars circle the northern point in silence, night after night, age after age. Nothing hurries, nothing breaks the pattern. The entire heavens seem to move in a great, invisible music. A people living under such a sky would think differently about time. They would not experience the night as empty darkness, but as order made visible. The stars would be teachers of patience. Their movement would show that life turns, returns, and completes its cycles. The long rhythms of the heavens would calm the urgency of human desire. Under such a sky, ambition might seem small. War might seem foolish. The soul might begin to seek alignment rather than victory. This is why the Hyperboreans are so often imagined as peaceful. Their peace is not only social, it is cosmic. They live under the turning center of the sky, and their society mirrors that order. Apollo's lyre and the polar heavens teach the same lesson. Harmony depends on relation. Every string must be tuned. Every star has its path. Every season has its place. Every human life belongs to a greater pattern. Mountains deepen this symbolism. If Hyperborea lies beyond mysterious northern ranges, then its mountains are not simply barriers. They are sacred walls. They protect the hidden land, but they also lift it toward the sky. Mountains have always suggested nearness to the divine because they rise above ordinary life. Their peaks catch light before the valleys do. Their summits seem closer to the gods. They are difficult to climb, and difficulty makes them holy. In the Hyperborean imagination, one can picture mountains surrounding the blessed land like a crown. Snow covers their slopes. Temples stand at their feet or on their high terraces. Sacred fires burn in sheltered sanctuaries. From the highest places, priests or singers watch the stars circle the pole. The mountain becomes an earthly echo of the cosmic axis, a vertical path from the human world toward the heavens. Perhaps the Hyperboreans would have had a central mountain, a holy peak regarded as the heart of their world. Around it, rivers might begin. Around it, festivals might be arranged. Around it, temples might face the rising sun or the turning stars. The mountain would not be worshipped as mere stone, but as a meeting point. Earth rising to heaven, heaven descending toward earth. In such a place, Apollo's light would seem especially pure. This imagined sacred mountain connects Hyperborea to many other mythic geographies. Mount Olympus was the home of the Greek gods. Mount Meru stood at the center of certain Indian and Buddhist cosmologies. The world tree Yggdrasil connected realms in Norse myth. Sacred mountains, trees, and pillars appear again and again because human beings look for vertical meaning. We live on the surface of the earth, but we dream upward. We want to know where the sky begins and where the divine can be approached. Hyperborea, as a northern land near the axis of the sky, gives that upward dream a geography of snow and stars. The pole star, or the idea of the northern celestial center, adds another layer. A fixed point in the sky is useful for navigation, but it is also spiritually powerful. Travelers can lose their way on Earth, but the northern sky gives orientation. To know the center of the sky is to know direction. In symbolic terms, to know the center is to stop drifting. Hyperborea, living near that center, becomes a land of orientation. Its people know where they are in the cosmos. Perhaps this is why they do not seem restless. Restlessness often comes from disorientation. People who do not know their center seek it in power, movement, possession, or conflict. The Hyperboreans, in myth, already live near the center. Their lives are not frantic because their world is aligned. They do not need to conquer distant lands because the sacred axis passes through their own. The aurora, though not always explicitly described in ancient Hyperborean sources, fits naturally into the later imagination of the polar sky. Curtains of green, violet, and blue light moving silently over snowfields seem almost impossible to witness without feeling awe. For ancient or mythic observers, such lights would surely feel like divine signs. Skyfire without flame, music without sound, the heavens breathing color. In a land of Apollo, auroras become celestial hymns, visual music written across the night. Imagine a Hyperborean ceremony beneath the aurora. The people gather on a stone terrace above a frozen lake. No one speaks at first. The sky begins to move. Pale green light trembles near the horizon, then rises in long ribbons. The mountains become black silhouettes. Snow glows faintly. A lyre begins, soft and slow. The music does not compete with the lights. It follows them. The people sing as if answering the sky. Above them, the stars continue their circular path around the invisible center. In such a scene, astronomy, religion, and art are not separate. Watching the sky is worship. Music is cosmology. The mountain is architecture. The temple is an instrument. The people do not study the universe from outside it. They participate in its order. This is one of the deepest differences between sacred and modern views of the sky. Modern astronomy gives us magnificent knowledge. Distances, chemical compositions, stellar evolution, galaxies, cosmic background radiation. It expands the mind beyond anything the ancients could have imagined. But ancient sky watching gave another kind of knowledge: belonging. It told people when to sow, when to sail, when to celebrate, when to mourn. It placed human life inside visible cycles. Hyperborea preserves that older sense of belonging. Its people live beneath a sky that teaches them harmony. They do not need to separate science from song, because both arise from attention. To watch the stars carefully is already to become more patient. To see the heavens turn around a center is to understand that the world has form. To sing beneath that sky is to place the human voice inside the cosmic pattern. The idea of the world axis also helps explain why Hyperborea was imagined as untouched by ordinary corruption. Centers, in myth, are often places of purity. Corruption belongs to the edges of disorder, to the places where harmony has broken. But the true center, the axis, remains connected to divine order. If Hyperborea lies near that axis, then its blessedness is not random. It is structural. The land is holy because it stands near the cosmic point of balance. This does not mean Hyperborea is at the geographic center of the world. It may be at the northern edge, but myth often reverses such categories. The edge of the map can be the center of meaning. What is far from ordinary civilization may be close to the sacred center. This is one of Hyperborea's most important paradoxes. It is remote from men, but central to the gods. The polar sky makes this paradox visible. To those at lower latitudes, the north is a direction. To those who dream toward the pole, the north becomes a center around which the heavens turn. Hyperborea is far away horizontally, but central vertically. It is distant across the earth, yet close to the axis of heaven. This gives the myth an extraordinary stillness. A land near the world axis does not need to rush. Everything turns around it. The mountains stand, the stars circle, the god returns, the festivals repeat. The people live long lives within a rhythm larger than history. While ordinary cities rise and fall, Hyperborea remains in sacred time. Sacred time is different from historical time. Historical time is filled with events: wars, kings, disasters, migrations, inventions, collapses. Sacred time repeats: dawn, solstice, festival, offering, return, departure, rebirth. The Hyperboreans seem to live more in sacred time than historical time. This is why their land feels untouched. It is not that nothing happens there. It is that what happens there belongs to rhythm rather than crisis. Apollo's yearly or periodic journey to Hyperborea fits this pattern. The god comes and goes, the people prepare, the offerings are made, the songs are sung. His absence is part of his return. The sky turns, the seasons shift, the center holds. Hyperborea becomes a land where life has not been torn from sacred repetition. In modern life, many people feel trapped in historical time. Deadlines, news, crises, changes, anxieties, and the constant pressure of the next event. Hyperborea offers relief because it imagines a life governed by deeper cycles. The stars do not hurry. Mountains do not panic. Snow falls, melts, returns. Songs are learned by children and sung again by elders. The god departs and returns. This rhythm is soothing because it suggests that not all time is urgency. The sacred geography of the polar sky also gives Hyperborea a sense of height. Even when imagined as a land, it feels elevated. It belongs to thin air, clear light, and the upper regions of the world. Its people seem lighter than ordinary mortals, not because they lack bodies, but because their bodies are less burdened by disorder. Their closeness to the axis lifts them spiritually. They are northern, but also upward. As we imagine their temples beneath the polar lights, we can see how architecture might reflect this. Open roofs, high platforms, pillars aligned with stars, circular courts mirroring the turning heavens, sacred fires at the center of stone rings, swans carved into archways, laurel and sun symbols on golden surfaces. Everything designed not to overwhelm the sky, but to receive it. A Hyperborean temple would not try to trap the divine indoors. It would frame the divine already present in light, snow, star, and silence. Its walls would protect the ritual, but its openings would honor the heavens. Its central fire would echo the sun. Its circular floor would echo the star paths. Its music would echo the hidden harmony of the spheres. This may be the most beautiful vision of Hyperborea, a civilization built as a response to the sky, not a civilization of expansion, not a civilization of noise, not a civilization obsessed with leaving monuments to its own greatness, a civilization oriented toward the pole, toward the mountain, toward Apollo's returning light, toward the measured music of the universe. A people who live under the axis of the world and shape their lives accordingly. Whether Hyperborea was ever thought of literally in these exact terms by every ancient writer does not matter as much as the symbolic power of the idea. The myth draws together north, stars, mountains, Apollo, sacred order, and blessed life. It says that geography can become cosmology. It says that the place where the world seems most distant from ordinary human warmth may also be closest to divine clarity. And as the chapter closes, picture the Hyperborean night one more time. The land is still. Snow covers the valley. A temple fire burns at the center of a circular court. Mountains rise like guardians around the horizon. Above them, the sky turns slowly around its invisible center. The aurora moves like a silent hymn. The people sing softly, and their song does not rise against the universe, but with it. In that moment, Hyperborea is not merely a paradise in the north. It is the world in alignment, the earth below, the stars above, the mountain between them, and the human voice finding its place in the turning of heaven. No myth remains unchanged forever. Once a story enters the human imagination, it begins to travel. It passes from poet to historian, from priest to philosopher, from ancient text to medieval manuscript, from scholar to mystic, from careful interpretation to wild speculation. With every generation, something is preserved, something is forgotten, and something new is added. Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, followed this same path. It began as a sacred northern paradise in Greek imagination, but over time it became many things: a lost land, a spiritual homeland, a symbol of purity, a mystery of ancient geography, and eventually, in some later traditions, a shadowed idea that could be misunderstood or misused. The earliest Hyperborea was bright. It was connected with Apollo, music, offerings, long life, peace, and sacred distance. It was not a land of conquest or domination. It was not a myth of power. It was a myth of harmony. But as centuries passed, the world around the myth changed. Ancient geography became more detailed. Empires rose and fell. Religious worlds shifted. The old gods were reinterpreted, forgotten, demonized, romanticized, or transformed into symbols. Places that had once lived at the edge of the map became less mysterious as travelers, traders, soldiers, and scholars filled in more of the world. This created a problem for Hyperborea. A hidden paradise depends on distance. It needs the edge of the unknown. It needs mountains no one has crossed, winds no one has passed, and horizons that still belong partly to dream. But maps don't leave mysteries alone forever. As knowledge expanded, the far north became less available as a blank space. Real lands, real peoples, real climates, and real histories began to replace the imagined northern beyond. The more clearly the world was drawn, the harder it became to place a perfect land beyond Boreas. And so, Hyperborea began to withdraw. It did not disappear all at once. Myths rarely die in a single moment. They fade, migrate, change form, and settle into new meanings. Hyperborea remained in texts, references, poems, scholarly discussions, and later dreams of the ancient world. But it was no longer simply a living possibility at the edge of Greek geography. It became a memory of how the ancients imagined the North. It became an emblem of lost sacred geography, a sign of a time when the edge of the map could still open into paradise. Yet the idea continued to echo. The far north remained powerful in many traditions. In different cultures, northern lands, snowy mountains, polar lights, and distant islands continued to suggest mystery. The north could be the home of spirits, ancestors, gods, giants, hidden peoples, or secret wisdom. It could be harsh and deadly, but also pure and sacred. Hyperborea became part of a much larger family of northern myths, all shaped by the same emotional landscape: cold, distance, silence, light, danger, and awe. And in Norse myth, for example, the north is not simply a direction of peace. It is filled with frost, giants, cosmic trees, gods, doom, and renewal. The Norse imagination gave the cold world a grand and often tragic power. There are icy realms, burning realms, world serpents, divine halls, and the great ash tree Yggdrasil, connecting worlds. This is not Hyperborea, but it shares the sense that the far north is not ordinary. It is cosmic. It belongs to the structure of reality itself. In Siberian and Arctic traditions, the northern world is not a blank emptiness, but a living spiritual landscape. Real peoples have lived with snow, ice, animals, stars, darkness, and seasonal extremes for countless generations, developing rich cosmologies and practical wisdom that outsiders often misunderstood. To them, the North is not merely symbolic, it is home. It is full of spirits, roots, animals, ancestors, obligations, and stories. This reminds us that when Mediterranean writers imagined Hyperborea, they were dreaming about a North that real people knew in far more complex ways. That is important. Hyperborea is a Greek myth of the North, not the truth of all northern peoples. It tells us what the Greeks needed the far north to mean. It does not replace the living histories of Arctic, Siberian, Scandinavian, or other northern cultures. The myth may be beautiful, but it should be held with humility. The North was never empty. It was never just a canvas for southern dreams. It was, and remains, a world of real lands and real peoples. Still, myths can echo across cultures without being identical. Many northern traditions share images of sacred mountains, world centers, long journeys, heavenly lights, hidden beings, and special relationships between humans and cosmic forces. Hyperborea belongs to this broad symbolic field. It is one ancient version of the idea that the far north opens towards something beyond ordinary life. Later writers also connected Hyperborea to the idea of a lost golden age. In this interpretation, Hyperborea was not simply a faraway country, but a remnant of humanity's original purity. Its people seemed like survivors of a better age, a time before corruption, war, greed, and spiritual decline. The land beyond Boreas became a place where the golden age still continued, hidden from the rest of the world. This helped explain why the Hyperboreans were so peaceful and long-lived. They were not merely lucky, they belonged to an older order of being. This idea is powerful because it changes Hyperborea from a distant location into a lost condition. Perhaps the real mystery is not where Hyperborea was, but what it represented: a humanity not yet broken, a civilization not yet driven by ambition, a society where music, ritual, and divine nearness remained central. If so, Hyperborea disappeared not because travelers failed to find it, but because the world itself moved away from the state of harmony it symbolized. The disappearance of Hyperborea, then, can be understood in several ways. Geographically, it disappeared as maps became clearer and the mythical edge of the north receded. Religiously, it faded as the old Greek sacred world changed, and Apollo's living worship gave way to later traditions. Symbolically, it disappeared as humanity entered deeper into historical time. War, empire, technology, restlessness, and the slow loss of sacred geography. The land beyond the north wind became harder to imagine, because the world became harder, louder, and more measured. But Hyperborea also has a shadow. Some later interpretations, especially in modern times, took the myth in darker directions. Because Hyperborea was imagined as a pure northern homeland, some writers distorted it into theories about ancient superior races, secret origins, or ideological fantasies of northern purity. These interpretations are not the heart of the ancient myth. They are later misuse. They take a gentle story of Apollo, music, blessing, and sacred distance, and twist it toward exclusion, pride, or false history. It is important to separate these shadows from the older legend. The Hyperborea of Greek myth is not a doctrine of domination. It is not a political program. It is not evidence for claims of superiority. The Hyperboreans are blessed because they live in harmony with the divine, not because they conquer or rule. Their purity is spiritual and mythic, not a weapon to be used against others. Their greatness lies in peace, offerings, music, and long life, not in power over the world. When myths are misused, the answer is not always to abandon them. Sometimes the answer is to return to their deeper meaning. Hyperborea should be remembered not as a fantasy of superiority, but as a dream of sacred harmony, a land beyond the north wind, a people beloved by Apollo, a place where music heals the world and human life is not torn from divine order. If there is any purity in the myth, it is the purity of snow, light, and silence, not the false purity of human pride. The shadow side of Hyperborea also teaches us something about longing. Human beings often long for origins, for lost homelands, for golden ages, for places untouched by decay. That longing can become beautiful when it leads to humility, reverence, and healing. But it can become dangerous when it becomes pride, exclusion, or the belief that one group alone owns the sacred past. The myth of Hyperborea asks to be approached gently, with imagination, but also with care. Perhaps this is why the disappearance of Hyperborea is not only a historical or geographical question, it is a moral one. What happens to a paradise when human beings try to possess it? What happens to a sacred myth when it is turned into identity, power, or ideology? The answer is that the paradise fades. The music stops. The land beyond the wind closes itself again. Hyperborea can only remain Hyperborea if it stays beyond conquest. It cannot be owned. It cannot be reduced to a flag, a bloodline, a theory, or a claim of superiority. It belongs to the realm of sacred distance. It is approached through silence, wonder, and humility. The moment it is dragged into the noise of power, it is no longer the land of Apollo. It is only another human distortion. And yet, despite all this, the myth still glows. Beneath later shadows, the original image remains. A far northern land, snow bright beneath a pale sun, swans on dark water, a temple open to the sky, offerings carried across great distances, a people who live without war, Apollo arriving in beauty, music rising into cold, clear air. That image is difficult to destroy. It survives because it answers a need that no map can erase. We still need places beyond the wind. We still need images of life not ruled by noise, sickness, greed, or fear. We still need myths that remind us that distance can be holy, silence can be full, and the far edge of the world can hold not emptiness, but blessing. So, Hyperborea disappeared from geography, but not from imagination. It became less a place to be found and more a light behind the idea of the north. It remained wherever snow suggested purity, wherever auroras suggested divine movement, wherever mountains suggested thresholds, wherever music suggested a world restored to order. It remained in the human tendency to look beyond hardship and ask whether peace lies somewhere past it. Perhaps this is the truest way to understand its disappearance. Hyperborea did not vanish like a city destroyed by war. It receded like a star into morning light. It became harder to see as the world changed, but it did not cease to exist as a symbol. It withdrew from the outer map and entered the inner one. And there, in the inner north of the imagination, the land beyond Boreas still waits, not as a kingdom to conquer, not as a secret to possess, but as an echo of sacred peace, calling softly from the ice. There are myths that survive because they terrify us, and myths that survive because they comfort us. Hyperborea belongs mostly to the second kind. It is not a story of monsters, punishment, doomed kings, or cities swallowed by their own pride. It is quieter than that. It is a story of a land beyond the north wind, a land of snow and light music, and silence, where a blessed people lived close to Apollo and far from the suffering of ordinary history. Perhaps that is why it continues to call to the imagination. Hyperborea offers something rare, a paradise of clarity, not the heavy abundance of a garden, not the golden excess of a royal city, not the mystery of a drowned continent, but the clean, bright stillness of the far north. It gives us snow without despair, cold without cruelty, distance without loneliness, and silence without emptiness. It is a dream of the world, made pure enough to hear divine music again. When we think of paradise, we often imagine warmth. We imagine fruit, flowers, rivers, green shade, and soft air. Hyperborea gives us a different vision. It tells us that paradise might also be found in brightness, spaciousness, and stillness, in a valley surrounded by snow-covered mountains, under a sky where the stars turn slowly, around a hidden center, beside a dark lake where swans move without sound, in a temple where the air is cold, the fire is golden, and the song rises with perfect calm. This northern paradise is powerful because it reverses expectation. The north wind should lead to hardship. Instead, the myth says that beyond it lies peace. Winter should mean death. Instead, Hyperborea turns winter into purity. Distance should mean exile. Instead, it becomes holiness. The edge of the world should be empty. Instead, it is filled with gods. In this reversal, the myth offers a deep kind of hope. It says that the harsh thing may not be the final thing. The wind may be a threshold. The cold may be a veil. The darkness may guard a hidden light. Hyperborea is not merely far away. It is beyond Boreas, beyond winter, beyond ordinary suffering, beyond the restless disorder of human life. That word, beyond, is the heart of the story. Human beings have always needed a beyond. We need to believe that the visible world is not the whole world, that the present condition is not the only possible condition, that somewhere beyond fear, noise, illness, and conflict, another order exists. Some cultures place that order in the past, as a golden age. Some place it in the future, as a promised renewal. Some place it after death. The Greeks, in the myth of Hyperborea, placed it in the far north, at the edge of the map, beyond the breath of winter. And because it was beyond, it remained safe from ordinary possession. No army could easily march into Hyperborea. No merchant could reduce it to trade. No king could make it just another province. It remained hidden, protected by distance and myth. This is part of its beauty. Hyperborea is not a paradise to be conquered. It is a paradise to be contemplated. The Hyperboreans themselves are equally important. They are not remembered as warriors or empire builders. They are remembered as blessed people, people of Apollo, people of music, offerings, long life, and peace. Their greatness is not measured by monuments or victories. It is measured by harmony. They represent a form of humanity that does not need domination in order to feel complete. This may be the deepest reason the myth still matters. The modern world is powerful, but rarely peaceful. It moves quickly, speaks loudly, measures constantly, and often treats silence as emptiness. It has gained extraordinary knowledge, but many people feel spiritually tired. Hyperborea offers a counter-image, a civilization whose highest expression is song, ritual, clarity, and right relationship with the divine. The myth asks us to imagine a different kind of success, not more territory, not more wealth, not more speed, not more noise, but more harmony, a life tuned like Apollo's lyre, a society where each string has its place, where tension is balanced, where beauty emerges from proportion rather than excess, a people who live long not because they have defeated nature, but because they are not fighting against the order of life. Of course, Hyperborea is not history in the ordinary sense. We cannot point to a confirmed location and say, here stood the temples of the Hyperboreans. We cannot find the swan-drawn chariot of Apollo beneath the snow. We cannot prove that a blessed people lived beyond Boreas, untouched by sickness and war. The myth belongs to sacred imagination, not to the map as modern science understands it. But myths do not need to be literal to be meaningful. Hyperborea tells us what the far north meant to the ancient soul. It tells us that cold could become purity, that remoteness could become holiness, that the edge of knowledge could become a doorway to the divine. It tells us that the Greeks, surrounded by the struggles of their own world, could still imagine a people who lived in peace. And perhaps we still imagine them because we need them. We need the thought that somewhere, even if only in myth, human life can be gentle. We need the image of a land where music matters more than power. We need the idea that the gods, or the sacred, or the deeper order of existence may be found not only in heat, abundance, and noise, but also in silence, snow, and distance. Hyperborea gives the tired mind a place to rest. Imagine returning there one final time. The journey has taken us beyond the familiar world, beyond the warm harbors of Greece, beyond the last known roads, beyond the forests and mountains, beyond the sharp breath of Boreas. Now the wind has fallen silent. Before us lies the hidden land. Snow stretches across the valley, shining under a pale sky. The mountains stand like guardians. A river moves slowly through the cold light, its surface dark and clear. Swans drift across a sacred lake. In the distance, a temple glows with golden fire. Its columns are carved with laurel and sun signs. Its roof is open to the sky. Above it, the aurora moves like a silent hymn. The people gather. They do not hurry. They do not shout. Their faces are calm. Their clothing catches the light of snow, and flame. Somewhere, a lyre begins to play. The sound is gentle, almost fragile, but it fills the valley because nothing in that world tries to overpower it. Voices join the lyre, and the song rises into the northern air. It is a song for Apollo, a song for the returning light, a song for the land beyond the wind. For a moment, everything is in harmony. The fire, the snow, the stars, the mountains, the swans, the people, the god, and the silence around them. Nothing needs to be explained. Nothing needs to be conquered. The world is simply aligned. That is Hyperborea at its purest. Not a theory, not a coordinate, not a lost empire. A vision of alignment. And when the vision fades, when the temple grows distant, when the song becomes only a memory, we return to our own world carrying something of its stillness. The north wind still blows here. There is still hardship, illness, conflict, uncertainty, and noise. But the myth leaves behind a quiet possibility that beyond the wind, or perhaps beneath it, there is always a deeper order waiting to be remembered. Maybe Hyperborea was never meant to be found by ships or armies. Maybe it was always a place reached by the imagination when the soul becomes quiet enough. A land not on the outer map, but on the inner one, the sacred north within us, the place of clarity beyond fear, the snowfield where thought becomes still, the temple where music returns. And so, Hyperborea still calls from the ice. It calls whenever the world becomes too loud. It calls whenever we look at the northern sky and feel that silence may be holy. It calls whenever snow covers the earth and makes everything seem new. It calls whenever music restores order to a troubled heart. It calls from beyond Boreas, beyond winter, beyond the edge of the known, the frozen paradise of the ancient gods, the land of Apollo's swans, the golden country of the north wind's far side, and perhaps, in the end, the dream of a peace that human beings have never fully stopped seeking. If you enjoyed this quiet journey into the mystery of Hyperborea, consider subscribing to the channel for more long-form stories about ancient myths, lost worlds, forgotten civilizations, and the strange places where history and legend meet. You can also leave a like if this story helped you relax, and share in the comments which mysterious land, ancient kingdom, or forgotten legend you would like to explore next. Until then, rest well, listen softly, and let the old stories carry you a little farther into the night.